Is it quarterback? Is it offensive line? Diagnose Alabama's offensive woes going into this showdown with Ole Miss.
Well, I think it's a combination of both. And it's not just about the sacks. It's missed assignments. It's improper angles. It's not being able to recognize fronts and identify and count up who's responsible for who. So there's plenty of blame to go around. I think a lot of it's more mental errors and just a lack of execution up front. They are young on the left side. Caden Proctor's a true freshman. Tyler Buchner's a true sophomore. Really good athletes, really good players. I think you combine that with below average quarterback play to this point, and you've got yourself a bit of an offensive disaster. And I said this to you last week. I thought Alabama would play lights out, and I really believed that. And I'm really surprised that they didn't come out and not only play Jalen Milroe first. I'm not saying you don't play anybody else, but I was surprised they didn't come out and play Jalen Milroe to reestablish his confidence and steer the game plan back into what his game is and what his strengths are. And that is moving the pocket, play action pass, quarterback run, all of those sorts of things that we didn't see versus Texas that I fully expected to see, and that I think you have to do with a guy like him. Tyler Buchner, I was astounded at how inaccurate and how out of sync he was. He looked like he hadn't practiced at times. And so that clearly wasn't the answer. Ty Simpson gives him a little bit of a juice, but he's got to have the clock in his head go off. You can't have 5 sacks. So the quarterback position is about protecting yourself as well. It's not just the offensive front and everybody doing their job up there. You've got to know where to go with the ball. You got to know where you're vulnerable. And sometimes you just got to get the ball out of your hand and live to play the next down. It's concerning. And they ran the football fairly effectively. I think Roydell Williams had a nice day on the ground, weather notwithstanding, but that affects both teams. Alabama gave up some yardage on the ground. I thought was a bit surprising. And so just flat and sluggish. They almost look like they're second guessing themselves. Like they don't have much confidence. And right now I can see why, but it sticks out to me, Jim, because that's not normally what we see from an Alabama football team.
100%, Luke. As I watched that contest, I thought to myself, zero swagger.
Yep.
And is it Chris Budden? I want to get the name right. She was the reporter on the sidelines. Budden is if some reporters had said this, I would not put a lot of credence into it, but I know she's been on a lot of sidelines and she knows what she's doing. She said there was no conversations, no leaderships, not a lot of noise on the Alabama sidelines. There wasn't a lot of juice of people trying to get people going. Those, I think, are words that are concerning to Alabama. And, here comes Lane Kiffin, who even said in the offseason one of his biggest disappointments so far is that he's yet to beat Nick Saban. Everyone says this is his best opportunity coming in. What does Ole Miss do that's going to be a problem for Alabama if they can't score points?
Well, they've got a red-hot quarterback right now, and I think they're going to get Trey Harris back, which was huge. He got injured in the game against Tulane that I had 2 weeks ago, a game where Tulane got the best of Ole Miss, and quite honestly, had they had their starting quarterback, probably would have beat Ole Miss, and they beat them up front, which was really surprising. I thought Ole Miss rebounded this week versus Georgia Tech. Jackson Dart looked fantastic. He was uber efficient in the passing game, but he was a killer in the run game too. He was Quinshon Judkins has not been able to get rolling yet, but Jackson Dart's kind of picked up the slack there. They've got a lot of weapons. They're going to go fast as can be. This is not a good matchup if it turns into a track meet, because from what we've seen so far from Alabama, they're not going to be able to keep pace because they're not effective at the quarterback spot, and they've been struggling up front. And if Ole Miss gets ahead of them and it gets a 2-score type of deal, you start to question, all right, how would Alabama crawl back into this thing, particularly if they're struggling in the passing game to create explosive plays, to push the ball downfield? That's where Ole Miss is really strong. Ole Miss can create explosive plays, Right now, they're running the football with the quarterback. You'd like to be able to say they're running the football with Quinshon Judkins, but that hasn't happened as of yet. I think that's a little bit concerning. But it's right now on paper, it's not a good matchup for Alabama.
LT's neighbor said, felt like that 2014 Arkansas game to him offensively, where Alabama struggled. I believe that was on the road in Fayetteville, and I believe Amari Cooper had a couple of big catches. Felt like it was a 14-7 game, just off the top of my head here. For me, Luke's, it felt like insert Shula, DeBose, some of the bad era before Nick Saban got there. That did not look anything like a Nick Saban Alabama football team, even if you go back to 2007. I know they lost to Ole Miss back then, but this didn't even look like that.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. There's no juice, there's no swagger. But to me, you can use all those adjectives, and essentially what it is lack of confidence, right? Everybody's kind of looking around, waiting for somebody to make the play, or waiting for something to spark, and then everything takes care of itself, and it hasn't happened yet. And I think they do need to go back to Jalen Milroe, just because he gives them that athletic dynamic that the other guys maybe do not. But at the same time, I say that, are they going to take the offense and build it around those traits of his? Because we haven't seen that so far. And as we've seen Ty Simpson, we've seen Tyler Buchner. I think that'll be the last time we see Tyler Buchner, unless something happens injury-wise. At some point, does this get down to Dylan Lonergan, who is a true freshman, highly touted, very, very talented, obviously hasn't played, but if there's a lack of answers at some point, you're going to start turning to other options. And even if those options are younger, but they're talented, maybe you give that a shot.
It's an old thing around here. Back before Saban got to Tuscaloosa, the most popular guy in the state of Alabama was the backup quarterback. I never thought we'd get to a place where the most popular guy in the state of Alabama is the fourth string quarterback, but that's where we are on this Monday. Welcome into Monday Morning Live. He's Tom Luganville of ESPN. You see him every Saturday, and you hear him everywhere. Brett, who's one of the great American truck drivers, says Proctor needs to sit a few games and learn. He's speaking of Caden Proctor, who is better at run blocking than he is pass blocking. He's giving up a lot of Ole's on the left side of the line. That's got to impact you as a former quarterback, knowing that you can't trust your left tackle there on the blind side. I've always thought, Luke's, that the toughest transition from high school to college to play as a true freshman would be offensive line, and specifically left tackle. You evaluate these guys. He's as good of a recruit as you can have, but he does look out of place.
Yeah, he looks out of place because at the high, I would agree with you. The transition is steep and it is difficult and it can be daunting. And there are very few people that do it well early. And oftentimes what you try to do is put that player on the inside, or you put that player on the right side if you can. And that's not the position Alabama is in right now. Freshman offensive tackles are always going to be ahead of the curve in the run game versus the pass game. Think about it. Your average, normal, run-of-the-mill high school player that's not a high-profile recruit is essentially who they're playing against every single week. They're not playing against Jadeveon Clowney in high school. They're playing against a 6'1", 210-pound defensive end, maybe a good high school player. Well, imagine what Caden Proctor does to a player like that week in and week out. And then you line them up, and now it's the big boys. I mean, that is a huge, huge adjustment. And he'll get better. But right now, if you're going to suggest that you sit him, you're having to weigh the option, okay, is our number 2 or our number 3 a worse option than letting him take his lumps and work his way through this thing? That's a coaching decision, obviously, and they feel that Caden Proctor gives them the best chance.